Hi, everyone, and welcome to a July Personal Defense Network Live with Rob. This is an Ask Rob Anything, and a couple of housekeeping things. Of course, if you aren't following us on social media, you should be, and if you're on the internet, you should be able to find us. We have a PDN training tour giveaway, and it is ending at the end of this month. So if you go on our Instagram, you can find the link there. There's what, Rob, $20,000 worth of prizes, and I think there's 4 people that can win. It's got everything.
I know there's the number 14,000 is in my head, but I don't know if that's like
one. That's the summer gift. So there's 2 giveaways going on right now. Personal.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah. So the other one is the 4 winners, and then the new one, it's giveaways galore at personaldefensenetwork.com.
You're giving away everything from Viridian lasers to crossbreed holsters, minimalist stocks, like all sorts of really cool stuff. So if you haven't already, check that out. So like Rob said, we have 2 giveaways going on, one at $14,000 in prizes, another one at $20,000 in prizes. So if you haven't checked that out, do that now. And while you're at it, sign up for a premium membership. And if you don't want to do that, just sign up for a newsletter. It's free and it's awesome. So Rob, you're in California, right?
Yes. Yes, I am.
How are you?
So I got to California yesterday. And I'm in the Central Valley, and it's a little bit warm. I literally just, that's the reason we're getting started just a couple minutes late. Literally, this house that I'm staying at, the host is the range is at the house. The house is at the range, either way. So I'm staying here, and literally the students were still like packing up their gear. So the debrief went as they normally do. I don't, it's actually funny. One of the students asked something today about going and grabbing a beer or something like that after the class. And I said, normally I like to do that if I can, but today I have to do this live event. And then the other guy was like, man, I don't know, how do you do that? You've been out here all day, and you got here late last night after driving in. And this is what I do, right? Like, this is how I've set it up to be this way. So I don't care if it's at 7 o'clock or 7:10. At the end of the day, we know that as much as I appreciate all the live viewers, more people see these things recorded than not. And just like I'm not going to say, oh, well, it was 7 to 8, so we're going to end at 8. We're going to go to 8:15 tonight. And in the class, I'm only going to spend 1 day with that group, right? Potentially. Now, some of them are coming back for the class we're doing tomorrow, but theoretically, I have to set it all up as if we're only going to have 1 day together. So I owe them, and I'm super passionate about giving them as much as I can. So I don't care if it's a hot day and we have to take a couple extra breaks, or if the debrief is going late because one guy has this fantasy in his head that he's rationalized why a revolver pocket carry is a good idea. Like, we're going to hash that out and have the conversation. And if I'm a little late for PDN Live, I think PDN Live audience members get it. And the class certainly gets why they're not at home for dinner at 6, because we're working and there's things to be done, and we can sleep later and we can, do something else tomorrow. But today what we're doing is we're on the range training. And especially in California, right? Because you think about it, the person who signs up for the class in the Central Valley of California in July has already jumped through like 5 hoops, right? Like, they're a gun owner in California. They're a gun owner who's interested in defensive shooting and not just recreational trap shooting or USPSA or whatever. They're all but one person in the class had a concealed carry permit already. They signed up for a class, right? Which, a lot of gun owners who say they're into defensive shooting, but really are just gun collectors or hobbyists. They actually signed up for a class, and they're doing it in July on an outdoor range in Central Valley, where it's like 103 or something this afternoon. So they're super dedicated already, and they may not even know it, right? Because they may look at it like one of the guys said, well, we didn't have much choice. It was the only time you were coming here. Well, I get it, but I have certified instructors that teach our programs year round all over California. And there's other instructors who are here in California all the time. There's indoor ranges. They made that conscious choice to come out here, and I respect that and appreciate that. Just like somebody who's watching PDN Live that wants to hear the answer to the question or ask that question. And so the California classes, the New Jersey classes, the New York classes, the Massachusetts classes, I think everybody knows those are all kind of special to me in that it's easier to be a gun owner in Arizona. It's easier to go to training in Arizona. Maybe not in July because it's hot there too, but it's you go to I don't know, Scottsdale Gun Club and train inside. But here it's not as easy to be a gun owner, and it's not as easy to be someone dedicated to training and to concealed carry. So I really appreciate them showing up, and that's so, yeah, we do the work.
Awesome.
Awesome.
And being in California, New Jersey, New York, do you find that there's different gear in that class just because of limitations of what the students can purchase? Or are there different handguns that you normally see that you wouldn't in other classes?
And not necessarily different that I don't see different things I don't see in other places, but there are options that they don't have, right? Like the Springfield XDS, right? They don't have the Springfield XDS as an option here, except on the used market. There's some, because if say a police officer buys one, because they can buy them things that aren't on the list, and then they don't decide they don't like it, it doesn't fit them as an off-duty gun or whatever, they may put it, they sell it used, right? And then somebody might end up with one, but they're rare. They're kind of few and far between. And then there's capacity limits on the magazines, and certainly when we do rifle classes, the AR type rifles are definitely very different out here. So there's there are those things, but essentially the fundamentals are the same. And there are guns that you can find that, while they may not have as many options in California, there are plenty of options that fit what our regular recommendations are and what most people interested in personal defense choose. So, the modern striker fired gun in 9mm, it's an option. Just the magazine capacity or the number of model variants that are available may be different.
Gotcha. So also the whole country is going through a heat wave right now. I mean, I'm in Oregon, and I'm holed up in my room because there's air conditioning there. It's 100 degrees, which we never see that in Oregon. Wow. You're in the middle of California in a heat wave as well. How should students prepare to train for these type of classes? And also just in general, like I said, the whole country's going through a heat wave, but people still want to train. People still need to train. What should they do to prepare themselves to be out in the elements in the heat?
Well, as our PDN medical contributor and PDN tour instructor, Caleb Causey, would remind everyone constantly, hydrate. You just gotta drink water. You got to stay ahead of it. And hydrating is not just drinking a lot of water, but drinking a lot of water is kind of the key. But you want to make sure, if you have some electrolyte mix you can put in there, or maybe take a Gatorade and cut it in half or something like that. You want to keep kind of everything flowing through the body, but the hydration is just incredibly important. Getting into the shade, getting out of the wind if there's a lot of wind, those things can be important as well. And for us, usually what it is a pacing issue. So depending on the class, like today's class is much more intellectual than physical with the important parts of it, but there is a lot of physical activity. And for some of the people in the class, like just standing up all day is new, right? Let alone standing up all day in the heat in an athletic event is new. So where the class might go a little later, we might take a little bit more frequent breaks. I might be really insistent, like, no, this is break time. Don't ask me a question about trigger control. Don't ask me about how many rounds to reload. When I'm ready for you to reload, I'll tell you how to reload. But right now, just literally go sit in the shade and take a break. Because a lot of people, especially in the early part of the day, they don't, they haven't done it a lot, right? So I know what's coming at 3:30 or 4 when somebody wants to sit out and miss something potentially important. If we can push that moment off as far as possible, or even avoid it entirely because of pacing early and hydration early, that to me really is the key to the successful training day, because ultimately it becomes a safety issue. But after the safety issue of people getting, sort of disoriented or confused or overly physically fatigued, the other problem, of course, is that they're missing out, right? They're not getting the full value of the course because they're sitting out reps, or they're, just so exhausted that they're, not hearing the words right or whatever, and not processing information properly. So much of a defensive shooting class, ours certainly is, and most should be, about collecting and processing information and dealing with the chaos and dealing with the variables. When you start losing cognitive processing skills, and when you're so physically fatigued that you're distracted from what's going on, then it really becomes not just the danger issues. Even if we control them by kind of slowing the class down, then you're not getting the full value of the class. So pacing and hydration, pacing really just means longer and more frequent breaks than we might normally take. Now, tomorrow's class is not as physical as today's. So it's normally a slower paced class. Our advanced, it's advanced class dealing with vehicles. And there's a lot more kind of conversation and science dissecting, kind of what science experiment kind of stuff, what happens when bullets go through glass in the car and things like that. So tomorrow we aren't going to worry as much about the heat. It won't really change the class as much as today's would have. And there are certainly classes where the heat would affect it more. Rifle classes, for example. We just did a very physical class in Las Vegas, and it was hot most of the day, and in Boulder City, actually, with Homeland Personal Protection. And that class we paced, especially in the afternoon, we really slowed the pace down to keep the safety in check.
And people that are on the range, I mean, obviously they, like you said, they're standing up for a longer period of time. So they're already feeling a level of discomfort. What should they be looking out for when they start getting to that point of mentally and physically fatigued? Because like I said, they feel uncomfortable, they're hot, they're standing all day. What should be signs that you should be looking out for yourself or your buddy on the range?
I think the main thing is just that disorientation or the lack of focus. That's the main thing that I'm looking for. Is that, you know, when you tell somebody, you know, we run 3 to 5 shots or 4 to 6 shots bursts into the chest. So it's either 3 to 6 shots or 4 to 6 shots whenever you're shooting at a chest size box, unless some other specific instruction is given. And that's pretty well established in all of our programs by, you know, 10:30 in the morning at the very latest. So at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when you have somebody shoot at the chest size box and they double tap it and you say, you know, hey, how many shots you just fired? 2. How many are you supposed to fire? What they should say is, oh yeah, 3 to 5, you know, at the very least. That's what they should say, as far as acknowledging that they know better. If they turn to you and they're like, I have no idea, I don't know, and you're like, really? You have no idea? No, I really don't. Now it's like, okay, so that if I can get that warning that they aren't putting like the simple things together logically, now I know that, okay, it's time to take another break, or at least that person needs some more water, and we're gonna start watching that. So it's not, I don't think it's like you can't look at somebody. If it gets to the point where you can look at somebody and see that they're about to like lose it, it's probably too late. So I think the mental processing and the focus is the first thing I look for a sign that people need to chill out.
Good to know. So everyone across the country, stay hydrated. Okay, so into more live questions. Are there any more current, I'm trying to think if there's any more current event things that have happened since we talked to you last that we need to address, but I don't.
You know, I started doing the always be ready things. I'm doing 3 academies with 511, and that's been pretty cool. So I did the first one in Salt Lake City. I'm doing another one this week in Fresno, and then I'm doing one in Denver at the end of August. And I'm probably going to be doing more of them. It's a lot of fun. It's been great to be working with 511 as a tour sponsor, and sort of like, I guess, bringing that brand back into my world. You know, for a long time, you know, I said this at the ABR Academy, like the 511 pants just became so cliche and everything. And, you know, I mean, I was with that brand, you know, all the way back to Royal Robbins, you know, climbing pants and stuff like that way back in the day. And then got into the 511 thing, you know, during the Valhalla era, and kind of in the public sector. It's what everybody was wearing. And then really it just got to be like a joke, right? Like, you know, the guy that wanted to look tactical or whatever would run out and buy his 511 pants. And it just kind of like, that was the last thing you were ever going to see me in. But in the meantime, they have really changed that line of clothing to expand way beyond just the tactical stuff, and their shirts and their bags and obviously the different pants. Like, they've really done a good job. And the stores, just like out of nowhere, all of a sudden there's stores all over the place, and they're really nice stores. And they sort of normalize it's not the old police supply shop kind of thing, right? It's a regular clothing store that looks like an outdoor clothing store in about 70 to 75% of the floor space. And then in the corner, there's the, you know, tactical bags and pouches and holsters and all that kind of stuff. But in the middle of all that transitional material is like first aid kits and flashlights and all that kind of stuff that everybody should be thinking about having, whether you're tactical, defensive training, gun person or not. So I like that they're sort of normalizing some aspects of the protect what you love, everyday ready kind of lifestyle thing. We do have a new Protect What You Love shirt. That's happened too. I should mention that. So we got the Protect What You Love shirt just launched with Made in Apparel. So a lot of people love the one we did last year with WCG. And now we've got this new one that came out, the whole Protect What You Love thing. That was an article that came out, I don't know, a little over a year ago. And people really resonated with a lot of people. And that line of the first launch we did of that limited edition shirt went really well. So we just did another one. So that's kind of cool. It's like a black, dark black shirt, dark gray shirt, almost black with orange and white logo on it. So that's cool. People can find that on my social media. I think you just did a big race.
Yes, Gambler 500. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's gumballish, where you get a rig for $500 and you take it across BLM lands all over Oregon. We do have, it's one of the world's largest trail cleanups because we encourage everyone to leave the trail better than when they found it. And we have a big party and a concert in Central Oregon, and we had 1,700 cars this year. And I was telling Rob before we went live, it's like a Mad Max meets Burning Man sort of Death Race 2000 thing, but it was awesome and a lot of fun. Check that out as well. It's very interesting. There was a lot of in-industry, I want to say, sponsors.
I saw that. No, I saw there was a SIG car. I saw out there. There was a Noveski. They had a Ford Mustang. So I think next year, I'm so close, right? Oregon is the next state I'm going. I go to Reno and then I'm going to come up there. So it's so close in the schedule. If it's about the same time next year, I may need to make the arrangements that the tour schedule gets me.
I've been trying to get you to do Gambler, and we should do a live episode from Gambler.
Commit. If you commit to me.
Deal. I commit.
Because I'll get car sick if I read the map for anybody.
I'll navigate for you. Don't worry. I got you. All right, let's get into the live questions. We're getting some kicked our way here. And also, if you're listening live right now, type the questions in. We'll get to them. And usually our policy is as long as it's on topic, we'll get around to it. But it's Ask Rob Anything tonight. So, let it rip. Okay, so Daniel asks, I'm looking for a good way to carry when I'm wearing business attire that isn't suitable for carrying on my person. For example, what do you recommend by the way of carrying in a backpack or a laptop bag or etc.?
Well, we'll just caveat. I don't recommend that as a primary means of carry, right? There's so many pitfalls and negative potentials there. Not the most important one is the lack of control, right? If you put the bag down and then you go to the bathroom or just get distracted by something simple. And if you're in a boardroom, people aren't going through each other's bags necessarily. But if you're in a Starbucks and you leave and then a kid from the next table gets into your bag, like, it's just the tragedy potential there is pretty significant, right? We all, as firearms owners, have a responsibility to prevent unauthorized access. And I worry about the off-body carry in the public space first and foremost because of that. Now, that being said, like, I've got a bag right over here that has a pouch on the front here that when you kind of get into there's a space, which is really good. It's like a little Velcro-y space, which I have a little patch on, but I certainly could take one of the modules from like a crossbreed holster module that goes on one of the modular belly bands or on the bedside backup, one of their OHI modules, and put it in here. And then I would have the option of putting a firearm in there and actually with a holster. So I think the first thing is a good dedicated space that's only for the, it's my Pioneer Shooting Center 6-in-1 pack. Shout out to them. So obviously that's a 5.11 pack. I've kind of fallen in love with this little pack here since I've been using it on the tour. But so a dedicated space is really important. An actual holster, not just a space you stick a gun or that you stick a holstered gun when that holster isn't secure. Like, I use a crossbreed hybrid holster, right? People are like, oh, hybrid holsters don't work super well. And then you see them demonstrate it like as if they're potentially just not educated in how holsters work. I don't know. They will take the firearm and just kind of flip the holster over and shake it, and the gun will fall out. Well, that's true with some of the holsters, but if you're wearing it, then your body puts pressure behind the belt and it pushes that leather against the kydex, right? Well, conveniently. So that the pressure here of the leather pushing against that kydex is from your body is what helps with the retention, right? So when that happens, then we have good retention. If we don't, then it will fall out. So unlike one of the OHI modules that has a thick leather backing and gives you constant pressure without the body being pushed against the module, the regular holster I wear is not appropriate for just sticking in that pouch, because then if it gets sideways or upside down or falls off the table, that gun can come out of the holster. And now when I reach into the pouch, the trigger could be exposed. because that holster isn't designed to work that way. So you have to have a good holster that is anchored to the Velcro, right, or the hook, soft side hook and loop fastener, whatever it is. Yeah, the idea of stability and covering the trigger guard still has to count. So dedicated pouch, proper holster that's designed to work in that environment, or maybe has a strap or a flappy thing or retention button, something that'll actually keep the gun in the holster, and then just access control. Those are the most important things to worry about. I had a pack from Blackhawk that was really good bag. I liked it, and I still use it a lot. It's more of a briefcase than a backpack, and it had one of the RFID proof zones. It actually had two. It had a small one on the outside, and it had the center big Velcro opener that was RFID proof, and then it had a flat area on one side that also had the soft side hook and loop fastener. And I didn't always use it for a gun, but if I wanted to use it for a gun with one of those modules in there, it was plenty large for that. So you could put a couple magazine cases, maybe a flashlight case in there, all soft side, hard side Velcro, and then have one of those Ojai modules in that zipper spot. So you can, and obviously hard briefcases. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think those three principles are really important: access control, dedicated area just for the tactical or gun stuff, and then a good proper holster that's designed to work in that configuration.
Nice. So we got in another weather-related question, and dressing for being able to conceal but dress appropriately for the weather. It's hot. How should people adjust when they're wearing light t-shirts and shorts, not necessarily belts? How do you adjust your wardrobe with the weather?
That's a good question, in the sense that I think a lot of people really don't necessarily consider. Like, I don't know that many people that change their clothing only at weather extremes, right? But like, I think most of us probably change the way we generally dress from like July and February. It's probably pretty different. Now, if you live in San Diego, it might basically be the same. But if you're in most of the U.S., you're in a place where there's different seasons, right? There's climate change, in not the political climate change, but like the climate changes, the environment changes. So yes, this is extreme, but the principles apply every year, right? Every year it gets hot in July, and every year it gets cold in February. So it may only be 30 in Minnesota next February instead of 10, but it's cold. Right? So right now it's 100, but 100 versus 90, it's hot. It's not that radically different. So I think everybody probably has to accommodate seasons. I think everybody has to accommodate business attire versus casual attire at some level. But honestly, like, the more versatile your carry solution is, and that's where something like the modular belly band is universal, right? With a belt, without a belt, doesn't matter. And that's one of the reasons that I like the Ulti Clip. So I started using these Ulti Clips on these holsters because I can wear this around the belt or just straight to the pants. And in fact, I do usually use it straight to the pants behind the belt, because then this part doesn't show, right, with an untucked shirt. And I can do that 90% of the time I'm going to carry a gun. Maybe 95% of the time I'm going to carry a gun. This works just great. And the modular belly band fills the gap when it doesn't. And then a pocket holster might fill like 1 or 2%. But the fact is that when I'm not wearing something where that will work, I'm probably not carrying a gun, right? Because it's either, it would work with a bathing suit, but I'm not going to carry a gun when I'm going into the pool. It would work with a suit. I could tuck the shirt between the Ulti Clip and the holster. But usually, if I'm not at a trade event, if I'm wearing a suit, I'm going out. And if I'm going out, I'm going to be drinking. And if I'm drinking, I'm not going to be carrying. Mm-hmm. So it kind of balances out. So I think the more important thing is to recognize that we all deal with changes in our wardrobe, and finding a way to carry that fits with as much of our wardrobe and our climate as possible is really going to be the best solution. If you do have to go from, let's say, like clips to the belt versus doesn't clip to the belt, then the next trick is just consistency in position. Or if you're going to go outside the waistband versus inside the waistband, again, consistency of position. If you're going to carry center line, you're probably not going to carry outside of the belt in center line. So everything's inside, but maybe some of it's clipped to a belt and some of it's just belly band, no belt. If you're carrying, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, you might be inside the waistband or outside the waistband, but you should not, for example, I think it's less awesome if you carry sometimes outside the waistband at 4 o'clock, sometimes inside the waistband at 1 o'clock, and sometimes in a cargo pocket holster, right? Like those, that's different enough to be literally different movements of the hand to the gun and radically different ways of kind of clearing your garment. So as much consistency as you can get, at least in where you're carrying, if not specifically the holster. So
show me that rig again, and what's the name of that clip that you have on there?
The Ulti Clip. So it's Ulti Clip is a group of guys. This is their ultra super magnum double clampy model. This thing also is like a multi-tool. It's crazy, but but it's real grippy, right? And it kind of cams everything down together. And they make a smaller one. The original Ulti Clip is really nice too. And there's videos at Personal Defense Network about it. You can buy it right at the Crossbreed website. A lot of other holster companies now accommodate them as well, and you kind of can make it work with almost anything. I see people carrying medical kits with them, flashlights, all kinds of different pouchy type stuff that you can attach with this. And this also works on off-body carry, so you can use this to secure a holster in some types of bags and pouches where otherwise it wouldn't work. Again, I wouldn't do that with this particular appendix carry inside the waistband type holster because it's not designed for off-body carry in terms of its retention. But the holsters that are, this would work great to secure this inside of a bag when you weren't using the hook and loop fastener or something else.
Right, because we had a question in March that we never got around to, and his name was Wayne. So Wayne, if you're listening, there's your answer. He was asking how he could do an appendix carry while wearing suspenders. I think that we just found a solution for him.
That would work, or the modular belly band, of course. Yeah.
So Wayne, if you're out there, sorry we didn't answer your question in March, but we answered it now. All right. So we got a question, or we answered a question, I think a couple of Ask Rob Anything a little while ago about carrying in places where you shouldn't. I think the question was more like, hey, I'm going to a friend's house and they don't like guns. Should I still carry and not tell them? But let's make it a little bit more broad. It's summertime. People are out and about. Let's talk about carrying in a gun-free zone. I mean, if people are running into the post office and they don't want to have to take off all their stuff to go in, or they're going to a school event, maybe it's an event at the school like league soccer when school's out. What are people supposed to be doing in these gun-free zones? What should they be doing?
I think that the most important answer here is an answer that used to be common sense in the firearms training, armed defense, personal readiness, whatever community. And I don't know if it was originally attributed to like Walt Roush or John Farnham or one of those guys. But Farnham definitely it's been said over and over again. He says something, don't do stupid things in stupid places with stupid people, right? And you're probably less likely to need your gun. If you go to the illegal gambling parlor in the bad part of town run by the gang members, like you're more likely to need a gun, right? And a lot of people would say, well, make this weird leap to, well, if I were going to go there, I wouldn't go without a gun. And I think that's the point, because the part that is common sense, and I'm not sure who to attribute it to, except maybe everybody, for a long time in the industry, the part that was common sense was, if you're not willing to go to a place without a gun, don't go there with a gun. But the idea that the gun shouldn't be a magic talisman that empowers you to go someplace that you don't think it's safe to go, right? And if you're a police officer with flashy red and blue lights and they tell you go over there, you've got the armor and the gun and the taser and the lights and all that stuff, and you're going there for a reason. But if you don't have to go there and it's truly dangerous, you truly don't feel safe there without a firearm, don't go. But somewhere in the politics of personal defense, not even politics of personal defense, in the politics of gun rights, this idea of gun-free zones has been politicized to the point where it's now seems to be like the common thought process or first thought that's allowed, or at least tolerated by educated people in the gun community who train personal defense issues is, well, what you don't know, can't get you in trouble. Or they'll even point out that there are laws that say if you're carrying a gun illegally and you use it to stop a crime, you can't be charged with carrying the gun illegally. And those laws actually exist in some places, and it's incredibly confusing. It's a perfect example of government too big, government run amok, government that doesn't make sense, and too many laws on the books. Like if you have a law that says you can't carry a gun here, but then you also have a law that says, but you can't be charged for it if you save a life, that creates this quandary for law-abiding citizens who want to be prepared and who go take classes and who have their permit, that then are told, but you can't carry over here at the school. But wink, wink, nudge, nudge. If you use your gun, it's okay. As long as you're protecting kids. The problem is if you, like the guy last year who had a gun in his sock, right, and fired it off at the high school graduation. My comment was, if the guy was so scared of going to that high school graduation that he had to put a gun in his sock, like in his mind, somehow that made sense, right? Like a gun in my sock is better than going there without a gun. And he was the kind of guy that was at that level of training and that mentality, and obviously that level of gun handling, that he then set the gun off sitting in the stands. That guy really wasn't any safer because of the gun. I don't believe that his sock gun would have protected people if, like, Al Qaeda had showed up. I just don't buy it. So but the problem is a lot of people want to say, no, he has every right to carry his gun. No, he doesn't. Right? He has, unless your theory is he has the right to civil disobedience and to break the law and to pay the consequences for having broken the law, then yeah, I guess we all have the right to break the law and have our rights restricted. So if you're so afraid of going to the high school graduation that you need to break the law, then you realize you may lose your rights forever to carry a gun. And here's the real problem. I think when things like that happen, it leads to more gun-free zones. It leads to more stricter policing of gun-free zones too. It leads to people saying, you know what, look, that gun owner was reckless and negligent, and that's why we don't want guns at these events. And now we have more gun-free zones. And ultimately, when you sneak a gun into a gun-free zone, you're sort of giving approval to gun-free zones, right? Because everybody looking around that sees you there, including the business or the teachers or whoever else, they see you there, not in their mind, not carrying a gun, right? And giving money to that movie theater or giving money to that restaurant or participating in events at the school, ostensibly not needing to carry a gun and not bringing it up and not raising a stink about it and not, boycotting or giving your business to someplace else that's gun friendly. So you're approving of their gun-free zone sign. And people hate to hear that, but that's really the way I think it happens. So you really do a disservice to the fight for the right to keep and bear arms whenever you sneak into the gun-free zone, because you're sort of potentially going to embarrass us with getting arrested. You're potentially going to lose your rights by getting arrested. And you're potentially letting other people look around who see the NRA sticker on your car, by the way, and think, oh, that guy's an NRA member and he shops here. So I guess the whole gun-free zone isn't a big deal. So I guess that's the right answer. And then ultimately it's carry your medical kit, carry your flashlight, carry a knife, carry a taser, carry pepper spray, carry an impact weapon. Think about how you would use things in the environment, a bottle opener, a steak knife at the restaurant that doesn't allow you to carry a gun, or you're not going to carry a gun because you're drinking or whatever it is. Think about the improvised defensive tools or alternative defensive tools you can have, and have your medical kit and have your brain, your brain turned on, and just know that the gun isn't always the answer, right? You're going to get on a plane. Gun is not even an option, right? So you have to have another plan. It can't all be about the gun. Just like the bad guys, we all want to remind everybody that evil, the spree killer, it's not the gun, it's the killer, it's the guy, right? Well, guess what? When it comes to good people defending themselves, it's, again, not the gun, it's the guy or the girl. And I think that gets lost too somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And let's readdress the going over to a friend's house and you conceal carry. Should you ask ahead of time or just wing it? Or if they say no?
I don't think you do the ask thing, right? I think I do think you should respect private property rights and respect the wishes of others. But there's also such a thing as opening up a can of worms you don't need to open up, right? If you normally carry and you were to stop at the door and say, hey, is it okay if I carry my gun in, or call ahead, like, I'm going to be carrying a gun, is that okay? I think you're sort of opening the door to, why would it not be okay, right? As opposed to just normalize it and just like, I'm wearing shoes. I go into somebody's house and I see that they have all their shoes in a shoe rack right next to the door. I take my shoes off, right? If there's a no guns allowed sign on their door, we're going to have that conversation, right? But if I start to take my shoes off and they're like, oh, don't worry about it, that's just for the kids because they run around in the mud, right? Oh, all right, then I guess I won't. On the other hand, if I don't see all the shoes piled up and they're wearing shoes in their house, I'm not going to stop and say, hey, should I take my shoes off? It just like, why? That just seems like odd behavior, right? Unless you did just walk in the mud, and then that's why you're doing it. So You know what I mean? Like, so if carrying a gun is somehow like walking on someone's carpet with muddy shoes, then by all means make it a big deal and say, hey, I'm carrying a gun, by the way. Right. And for me, that would be when they offer me a drink. Right. Like, well, yeah, you know what, though? I'm just going to clear this gun and put it back in the lockbox in the car, or put it in the truck vault, or maybe they have a safe or whatever. If we're going to start having a few drinks, then I'm probably going to take my gun off, and that's when it's going to become an issue. So obviously for me, if I know I'm going to be drinking at their house, I'm not going to be wearing the gun in anyway.
All right. So Lane asks, concealed carry or open carry? What are your thoughts?
Concealed carry.
I was gonna see if Lane wanted to open a can of worms.
Yeah, maybe you're new here. The answer really is, so I get it. Like, there's time and place. Riding a horse through the Rocky Mountains, riding a motorcycle across Montana, like whatever. But if you are, like, my rule of thumb, if you're within 10 miles of a restaurant with a drive-through or a convenience store, don't open carry.
Do you want another can of worms? I just got an awesome can of worms that I want to open.
Go ahead, maybe. I'm reserving the right to pass on 2 cans of worms questions in a row. You give me 3 because I already talked about gun.
Mrs. Pincus asks, how much trouble will I be in if I open the Justin 2012 Isosceles Reserve because you didn't respond rapidly enough when I asked about what wine I should have tonight? Hats off to you, Mrs. Pincus, for coming in and asking a question on the live event.
That's like I think that's a level. If you're celebrating something, I don't know. It's like a lemon wine. Maybe something on the shelf below it from Ulti Clip is a better choice.
I'm sorry, I don't think we've ever had Sarah come on before and ask a question. Thank you for that. All right, let me get myself back together. I'm reading these questions. I'm looking at the names like, oh, look at that. Okay, let's get back on track here. All right, another live question. How often should we shoot or dry fire to be accurate?
Yes. 7. I don't know. I mean, if you're really not good at this yet, then you have to practice more. We talk about front loading your practice, right? So front loading your practice is the idea that shortly after learning a new skill or getting a new holster, getting a new gun, you should practice a lot. Your frequency should be, and you can Google front loading your practice as a concept, right? Front loading your practice is that if you learn something today, don't go to another class next week and learn something, and another class in a week and a half and learn something, and another class 3 weeks later and learn something, and then think, well, I'm gonna go to all these classes during the summer, and then this fall and winter I'm gonna practice a lot. It doesn't really work that way, right? By the time you get to September, what you learned in June, if you really haven't practiced it, it kind of evaporates, right? Especially if you got layers of things on top of it. So you're much better off to take like 1 class and then just practice that stuff a lot. Right. In fact, I tell people, like, if you take a 2-day pistol class from any of our, like, if you take this new program we do with USCCA, if you were to take the defensive shooting fundamentals level 1, defensive shooting fundamentals level 2, and just practice all that stuff for the rest of your life, right, you're probably way better off than taking another class every 6 months for the rest of your life and not really dedicating the time and the money and the ammo and the energy to practicing to ingrain those skills to an automated level. So you imagine if you went to a different driving school every week, but never practiced. You only went to the driving school, like parking lot full of cones style, right? But you never actually drove. And then all of a sudden there's an emergency. And the first time you ever drive on a road in the real world, it's like 11:45 at night in a major city in the middle of a snowstorm after the big game footballing thing got over with on a Sunday night. I think they did on Sunday, right? In January, right? Or the Super Bowl in February, whatever it is. So like, and you have a passenger in the back, your family member who's screaming and going to die if you don't get them to the emergency room, right? So your traffic, snowstorm, darkness, and the screaming, and now you have to drive a real car across town, and all you've ever done was pretty much go on nice weather days to a parking lot full of cones and get instruction. So but you never practiced. So first of all, accurate is a made up term, right? It's hard to define that, right? To develop an acceptable level of your ability to apply your shooting skills in a plausible defensive event, yeah, that's a complicated mouthful of stuff. That should probably, I tell you, if you're going to take a class and let's say you've budgeted 1,000 rounds for the rest of the year or for the next year, you wouldn't want to take like 1,000, let's make it 1,200 to make the math easy. You've dedicated 1,200 rounds to training for the next year. Don't do 100 rounds a month. Right? What you really need to do if you just took that class is in the next month, shoot like 400 rounds, right? Practice once a week, 100 rounds. And then the next month, maybe practice 100 rounds every 2 weeks, next couple months, right? And then the next couple months, maybe 50 rounds every 2 weeks, and then go to 50 rounds a month for the rest of the year. Like however that math works out, right? Just really front load that practice so you get to really ingrain the skill heavily right after learning it, or learn that new holster presentation or the new position that you're carrying in or the new gun sights, whatever it is, you have to learn the new thing and then wean yourself off of the practice so it's just maintenance. I think I read a post the other day from somebody who's like, I'm already a really good shooter and I'm pretty awesome, but now I'm thinking about getting even better. What do you guys think? Is the return on the investment worth it? And it was like, other than just like typing, like it hurt my head to read it. I couldn't, like, it's like a car wreck. I had to read the whole thing, right? And it was like, at the end of the day, like you already know better, right? And especially as we all kind of talk to our sewing circles in the community, if you're waiting for someone to say from your sewing circle that really thinks marksmanship's incredibly important, like guess what? All your competition shooting and marksmanship hobbyist oriented friends are going to say, of course, you could be one of the world's greatest shooters. You just really have to try. And all your practical defensive based friends are going to be like, you're really already one of the best shooters I know. Why don't you, I don't know, learn how to sew or something, right? Like pick up a new skill, right? Like, so go take driving course or take more medical courses or whatever, do practical things instead of just chasing the last finest point on shooting. And I think that's what I fear when you first ask that question is somebody says, how much time should I put into being accurate? If you're talking about hitting golf balls at 100 yards, something like, don't bother, right? Because that doesn't matter. If you're talking about being able to hit chests rapidly at 12 to 15 feet from a carry gun after being startled and having to process information, put a lot of time into that. But once you can do that, the fear is that a lot of people are like, well, I got 4 shots off in 1.3 seconds and I was about 15 feet away, and that wasn't from concealment. So now I'm going to go to a concealment garment and I'm going to try to get down to 1.3 seconds from a concealment garment. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like if you're doing it from a reasonable speed open carry on a range to learn the mechanics, and then you put the concealment garment on, you should be slower, right? And then the question is, where is your reasonable potential? Like, where does chasing 1/10 of a second become completely irrelevant? Reloads is a perfect example. When you're moving, you're moving in a chaotic environment with lots of people while you're doing your reload, but you're looking at the gun. And you're like, well, I can shave. I've measured it. And I can shave 2/10 by looking down at the gun, and my reload's 2/10 faster. But if you look away from the threat and while you're moving and the threat's moving and you get a reload done 2/10 faster, and then you look up and it takes you 1.5 seconds to figure out where the threat went, you've had a net loss, right? And people just don't factor that in because why? Because we're standing in a parking lot full of cones, essentially, right? Driving with our hands at 10 and 2 and putting our turn signal on 250 feet before the turn. We're doing all this weird textbook stuff in a choreographed environment. So of course, I can look away from that piece of steel and like disassemble my gun, send it off to be Cerakoted, wait for it to come back, reassemble it, lubricate it, load it, look back up, and that piece of steel is still going to be there. So in that environment, that 2/10 seems to mean something. But in the real world, 2/10 of looking away from your target might mean not even finding your target, right? So I think that's really important to factor in is I don't know what you mean by accurate. I don't know what you mean by faster, but I do know that front loading your practice is the right answer to developing applicable skill after you learn that skill, or learning how to run a new piece of gear after you get that new piece of gear.
So in terms of personal defense, what is a skill everyone should learn in at least some capacity?
Really everyone, or everyone carrying a gun?
Let's start with everyone and then dial it down to everyone with a gun.
the skill that everyone should learn in terms of
personal defense in some sort of capacity. Like if you're gonna, if you're in an elevator with someone and they go, "What should I know about personal defense?" And let's have 2 elevator rides, one without a gun, one with a gun.
Okay, so the assertiveness, you have to learn to take action, right? You have to learn to be ready for the idea that you didn't see something coming and it's really happening. And once you see that thing happening, or you get the information in your brain, the assertiveness to take action sort of creates everything else, right? Because if I commit to that, if this person in the elevator who just is like, oh, personal defense next, why I don't wear these shirts in the elevator? Like, oh, personal defense network, what can you tell me about personal defense, right? And it's like, so you need to be ready to take action, because the thing that could really hurt you is not being ready, but thinking you're ready. Because I said buy a gun or get a flashlight or have a medical kit or whatever. Be ready to take action, which then begs the question, action in what circumstances, right? And then the answer is yes. So as you start thinking through, once you commit to being ready to take action, now you have to then do the research, like what's most likely to happen to me, or what do you think is the most important area? Well, maybe it's medical, maybe I've got a gun, I got my concealed carry permit, so I started carrying. What do you think I should learn? Well, now it's the application of defensive shooting skills, right? Like, if you're going to carry the gun in public, you probably want to know how to do something with it that's meaningful, not just pass a qual course, right? So the answer, I get it, probably isn't what like somebody's looking for, the magic secret trick. The magic secret trick really, I think, is being assertive and committed to the idea of taking action when something's happening. So that then becomes the stimulus, the motivation to be ready for more and more and more and more potential things that make sense for your environment and, you know, where you live, how you live. Actually, that's another housekeeping thing. We have a great new series from William April, PDN contributor, and a couple DVDs with us. Some really important DVDs too. I think the Violent Criminal Actor DVD and the 5 Ws DVDs are 2 that I recommend, for example, to that person in the elevator. If the person's like, well, I really don't even know what to train for, go, you're committed to this, go get the 5 Ws of Personal Defense DVD from William April. And he will walk you through what you really should be thinking about, right? And then if you're like, no way, I can't believe that kind of stuff was ever going to happen to me. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Why would someone kill someone over a shopping cart, right? Well, that's where you go watch the Violent Criminal Actors DVD and the new series that he's going to be doing. And if you've watched his social media, he's been doing this. He's been kind of putting these out for a while now. They Are Not You. And these are like studies, just clips from the news, like real true stories. This just happened, and some of it's pretty gritty and graphic. In fact, if you check out the PDN blog at personaldefensenetwork.com and just click on the blog, I wrote an article sort of announcing that this was going to happen. And some of this is disturbing, right? And this actually happened. And I think what happens, and he did this for me, he's like, don't try to make sense of it, because you can't. Like, the nature of the violent criminal actor is that in their worldview, this makes sense to them, but they're also the person who's going to stab you potentially over a shopping cart. You're not going to make sense of that. And if the guy's coming at you with a knife because you took a shopping cart, the last thing you should be trying to do is make sense of that. Like, let's deal with the fact that there is a knife coming at you and someone's saying they're going to kill you. Laughing it off or being frozen in confusion over the fact that this is over a shopping cart, you're really going to stab, right? That doesn't work. So being ready and committed to being assertive and taking action is what his whole series is all about. And it's just examples. If you've never really thought about it, like here's how fast it went crazy. And here's the things that actually happened you may never think could happen in the real world. And like small town USA, guy gets stabbed over a shopping cart. And then he kind of tells the story and makes some comments about it. So this is a really cool addition to the constant stream of awesomeness coming out of Personal Defense Network, is the regular series, They Are Not You, from William April. And that'll be starting up really soon. I don't know if one's coming out this week or if next week is the first week, but we're going to get started with that and it'll be a regular feature. So keep an eye on the Personal Defense Network blog.
Sidebar, that just reminded me of like shopping carts in small town. Didn't one of our contributors just wasn't he part of an incident at a Costco with a jewelry heist, and he recapped what I found very fascinating on that piece, and maybe you can touch base on this, was how he recapped how he watched everyone's reactions around him in that scenario. And I think that's interesting. I think that just came to my mind, something interesting to talk about as we wrap this up.
Gave a really good kind of, here's what we did, here's what we saw. And he had some interesting points about things that he saw that other people were doing. And I think, where the eyewitness testimony thing is always hard, right? Because people will tell you they did something that they didn't necessarily do. And it's like, well, show me the video of that. Because it's sometimes our training or our brain is focused on the threat, like the deer. I was talking, the deer jumps out in front of your car. You look at the deer and your foot goes to the brake. You may not remember hitting the brake. And when you investigate a traffic accident, people, I don't even think I didn't have time to hit the brake. And it's like, really? Because there's 30 feet of skid marks before you hit that other car or before you hit the deer. People don't remember the automated learned responses that they enact, right? As a kind of Brady psyche is the concept. Your brain isn't really keeping up with the automated stuff. The other side of it is the tachypsyche, where you super hardcore focus on stuff that is novel and new, the variables like the deer. People will, like, one of the classics in gun world is don't try to tell the cops how many rounds you fired because you probably won't remember. Right? People, I thought I fired 3 shots, but you fired 9. And then in court, it's, well, you told us you only fired 3 shots, but it turns out you fired 9. So the lawyers will tell you, like, don't try to get into the details. You shot. How many shots did you fire? I only fired as many as I needed to until I perceived the threat not being, danger to me anymore. And that's the right answer, but not because you're trying to deceive anybody, just because we know that those types of things aren't what you really remember. So when I read those kind of pieces, even from someone, a great friend of mine, like Caleb, it's like, okay, I'm going to take some of this with a grain of salt. But when you read the description of what he did, and it's funny, Sarah, Mrs. Pincus IV, that was asking about the wine earlier, I thought she was going to ask about an incident she was in, but she was in a very similar incident.
That's right. Yes, she was.
Street. She was at one medical complex. She was in one building, and across the street at the dentist, there was a kind of road rage that went crazy, which, like everything now, it's like there is an active shooter, which is technically true. There was someone actively shooting, and they locked everything down, and she found a barricade area, tornado shelter, kind of did everything that she was supposed to do, and we debriefed that and talked about it a little bit online. And then, like 2 weeks later, Caleb had this thing where he was with his family, heard the noise up front. And it turns out it was the noise he heard, I guess, was the glass being broken in the jewelry smash and grab kind of robbery. So he talked about, first thing, making sure the family unit was together. Second thing, finding an exit. And there was an issue of the exit had like a 15-second delay. So it was like hitting the thing and not reading the, hold this for 15 seconds or whatever it was. So there were other people who were just running right by that exit, sort of going to the more obvious, like the door they came in, right? I always talk about, like, if you're at the food court in the mall, jumping over the counter and going through the back of the Burger King, there's going to be an exit back there, right? If you ever notice, like, there isn't usually a way for the employees to come out into the main part of the mall from the behind the counter of the Burger King or whatever. So, but they obviously can come and go. So if the shooting's happening out here, you may not think about going over the counter in any restaurant, going through the kitchen. There's almost always going to be a way out, right? So just conceptually, not walking into a building and asking for a map, right? Or like doing a lap to find out where all the exits are. Just conceptually knowing in a major store like Costco, there are going to be exits kind of all over the place if you are dedicated to looking for them. Same thing at a restaurant. Through the kitchen, you're going to find them. So he talks about that. And then what was really interesting was apparently they went to another place and barricaded, and in the middle of the situation where they're trying to barricade, there was another event going on. There was some kind of a dispute amongst customers, and maybe it wasn't really that big a deal, but it wasn't, just because it wasn't where you were didn't make it a safe place. I was just in Vegas. One of our students was in the active shooter. He was at the concert. We had 2 instructors there. I had a really good friend of mine that I was on a SWAT team with years ago was there, and when he evacuated with his wife, they kind of went through the backstage because they were near the front. So he grabbed his wife and they left through and they went into another casino, and then they got trapped in a lockdown for a long time. Another group of instructors ended up setting up an evac area. They had their, SF responder medical kits from Frog Pro, and one of them got clipped on his cell phone, and another person they were with got hit in the leg, and they set up an area, consolidated their medical equipment, started a little kind of triage, and then one of them went back and forth kind of bringing in people that needed help. And then this other guy was like, he got bunkered down and then left as soon as he could. Then I heard from talk to one of the caterers that was there that was pulling people under their heavy steel framed trailers, right, for cover. So the reactions and responses that people have in these events where you go first may or may not actually be super really safe, right? So the idea of having a plan and executing that plan, I think what was most interesting to me was that his response plan didn't get him far enough, but his ability to collect and process information gave him those next couple of steps. And I think that's the biggest danger of a response plan. We talk about the difference between surprise and chaos. Surprise is the I didn't know this was going to happen, right? If somebody had called you and said, hey, the Costco is going to get hit today, you know, you might want to go to Sam's Club, right? Click, right? You're like, oh, we're not going to Costco. But that didn't happen, right? Everybody kind of gets that. You know that it's going to be a surprise, but then they think, so I'll do step 1, step 2, step 3, and debrief, right? And all of a sudden at step 2, there's some new information that comes in and you have to go to 2B and then jump to F, and then you find yourself circling back to C in the debrief like an hour later, right? So being ready to constantly collect and process information. And we start that on the range. We just don't look at your gun while you're reloading, because the bad guy is probably not a piece of steel just waiting for you to look back up. So collecting and processing information while you're doing the other stuff, it becomes really important, right? Just like we do when we drive. So that Caleb did a great job of that. He and his family responded to, you know, I'm sure his wife was like, oh, there's the exit, ta-da, and like hit it, you know, at 100 miles an hour, like, right? Like that was a great plan, except you had to do 2B, which was wait 15 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever it was for the door to open, right? So and then when they got to the place where, we're finally safe, you know, years ago when we used to do the counter ambush stuff for some of the special operations military guys during the global war on terror stuff we were doing about Valhalla Training Center, one of the key facets of that program was, you know, I'm not a Green Beret. I wasn't over there. So when they come in to train, it was kind of like, okay, what's the biggest problem you're facing? And then we'll apply our training concepts to it. And one of the things was being hit after the action on the objective. So they would go, you know, get the bad guys kind of stuff, right? And then they would say, okay, we did that, high five, let's go back. And on the way back, the adrenaline jumps, right? And it's like guys like falling. This is like, you know, early, right? Like before the up armored Humvees and stuff. And they would be like, we were just kind of like, right? And of course, the bad guys are like, hey, look, good guys, or I guess from their perspective, we're the bad guys. I don't know, like the Americans are blowing stuff up over here and shooting things, and the Americans live over there. So there's only like 2 or 3 ways they can get back, and they would be getting hit, setting up ambushes on the way back in, where theoretically they were like, we did our work for the night, now we're done. And having to like ramp up and respond again after the reaction of the ambush was a big deal. So we started building that into some of our FTX and some of our training scenarios, was this idea that we would, you know, put them on these, you know, at Valhalla it was easy because you know how it was. Like we put them on those couches in front of the fire after running through and hitting a house, and then you get back there and they, you know, and then like boom, your team's going again 5 minutes later when they're like, well, what about the other team? Nope, your team now. Go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Just to kind of ramp it back up. It's not the same as being shot at, but we wanted to integrate the concept into the training. And I think Caleb experienced that, and a lot of people experience that in real events. It's important that your training involves collecting and processing information, even in the midst of doing the things you're training to do, right? Doing the physical actions of the gun or whatever it might be.
It's crazy that there were 2 of the PDN family that had experiences in the real world in the past month. We're getting to the top of our hour for this. Rob, so you were in California.
The sun is setting, so it's kind of gotten
dark. Right, it's gotten dark on you. The sun is telling you you're done. Right. We've got a lot more questions, and we'll save those for the next round of PDN Live.
We can start late, though. I promised we would like, let's get one. Give me one more. I'll do a quick.
One more quick one. Let me see here. Oh, here's a good one. Have you ever taught, Maggie asks, have you ever taught someone who just could not accomplish what you were trying to teach them in an 8-hour class? As an educator, how do you help them feel confident that they can learn your methodology?
Really interesting. So let's do a little instructor development, right? So the instructor development point there is if you show up at 8 o'clock in the morning with some idea that by 5 o'clock at night, everybody's going to be able to achieve a certain goal. Either your goal is really too low, right? You're teaching a lowest common denominator kind of, you know, maybe worthless class, or you're going to fail, right? Because maybe you're going to create a reckless situation where you push your students too far. So the idea here is that what you really need to be doing is accepting the idea that competency is a subjective thing, right? So one of the things I tell students first thing in the morning is like, look, you've got to be prepared to, there we got more light. You've got to be prepared. Save this another 5 minutes. You've got to be prepared for the fact that today, one of the most important things that you can do is get a better understanding of your own capabilities today, right? And I don't come in with any expectations, right? Like you may have, I don't know, I got like a Navy SEAL. I know a lot of Navy SEALs who came to us for training that weren't really good with their pistols, right? They were primarily long gun guys. So, but somebody that's like a regular, CCW permit may say, oh, this guy was on like 6 combat deployments, but our state requires him to take a CCW course. So he's going to come in and take those. But guess what? He may never have shot a shield, the subcompact 9mm gun from an inside the waistband holster. And the psychology of that's important, right? Like, and on the other hand, you may have some guy who's like a teacher who shows up and just, got his concealed carry permit last week, but he might be awesome. He might be a really good kinesthetic learner and just super awesome experientially and just mindset. He's done all the research. So going in with expectations as an instructor is really, really dangerous. So am I sometimes disappointed that a student doesn't go further down a path, or do I think a student has way more potential than they reach in a class? Yes. Is some of that on me? Sure. Right. As an instructor, that's our job, is to help the students reach their potential. If you think it's achieve an objective goal, right? Because everybody in last week's class did this, so I expect you guys to do it too. That's kind of naive. It's just foolish. And the only time I really ever see that work, and there may be instructors right now thinking, well, all of my students pass the qualification courses, right? Well, yeah, if your qualification course is really simple or really choreographed, or really, that's all you do for 2 or 3 days is practice that course, yeah, you're probably going to have a 98% efficacy rate. But if what you're trying to do really is help all of those students reach their potential in that 8-hour period or 3-day period, then yes, you have to be open to the idea that you may guess wrong about where everybody's going to end up. And what I've learned over the years is to stop trying to figure that out. So I've got a whole bunch of stuff I want to teach. I got a whole bucket of information I can pull out. And so today we had a left-handed shooter. So I had to talk about some left-handed. If nobody was left-handed, I wouldn't have to talk about the left-handed shooter stuff. Today we had a guy with a revolver in the class, right? So we had to do revolver stuff, but I don't generally do revolver stuff because almost nobody that's serious about defensive firearms shows up in my classes with revolvers anymore. So the pitfall of that question is the assumption that I show up in the morning thinking everybody's going to reach a certain level, or that I have a level I want to get them to, other than subjectively saying push them as far as I can, empower them to go as far as they can. I had a student today who actually said in the debrief, he goes, I wanted to quit 3 times. It was hot. I have a muscle injury. I'm new to this. I wanted to quit 3 times today and you wouldn't let me quit. And at one point he actually said, like, I don't think, he tried to pull the safety card. He's like, I don't think it's safe for me to be out there. I'm like, I'll tell you, like, how many times have you done this? He's like, I've never done a class like this before. Okay, well, I've done like a whole bunch of them, right? So why don't you let me be the expert here for a minute and tell you when it's not safe, right? Or tell you when you can't go further, or tell you when you need to quit. And actually something similar happened a couple weeks ago in another class, where it was the same thing. So student just said, well, then I'm done. They get really frustrated. Well, I'm done. Well, I'll tell you when you're done. And by the way, you can't leave my range with loaded guns to get back up here. And basically they got back up on the line, and I think thinking I was going to clear their gun. And I was like, all right, everybody on the line, let's go. And just went and did the next drill, right? Kind of got over the moment. And I think that's really important. So I'm usually, if I'm ever surprised, I'm almost always more surprised at somebody being way more awesome, because I'm kind of like set up to be skeptical and cynical, I think, and maybe a little jaded, that people usually show up way overconfident, right? And so when someone's way better than I think they're going to be, or a gun that's usually not a reliable brand runs way better than it usually does, that's when I'm surprised way more than I'm disappointed that people don't reach a certain level, because I tend to lower my expectations. But I think that's really important from an instructor development standpoint, is that you just deal with potential. Students have to come into class and understand, number one thing they can do is understand themselves better. What are they good at? Number 2 thing they need to do is figure out what should they be better at, not what can they be better at. That's the hobbyist route. What should you be better at? What do you have an obligation as a responsible young person to be better at? And then the 3rd thing, and then of course, is how do you do it, right? Is it dry fire? Is it the CERT pistol? Is it simulator training? Is it live fire? Is it another class? Is it a new gear? Is it a new holster, new gun, new sights, new trigger, whatever, right? It's almost never new trigger, unless you have back to the stock trigger. That's the trigger. So there, long answer. I didn't do the short answer thing, but it's 8:15 now, so we've accomplished our hour.
We have. So you're in California today and tomorrow. You're, I would say, what, like 3/4 of the way through your tour?
I'm going to read Wednesday or Thursday. I'm doing this thing at the 511 store in Fresno. It's an active shooter seminar. And then after that, I go to Reno Guns and Range. I love the train there. It's a great world-class facility. The whole staff there teaches our program. So we're going to be doing some advanced stuff. I think it's 2-person or armed home defense or something. I think it's an armed home defense class, and then an extreme close quarters class, which I've done a couple of here in the last year. And, you know, kind of getting back into more of those. It's an area that just doesn't get touched on well enough, often enough in the industry. And a lot of people have been asking me to get back into that. So more of the within 2 arms reach stuff coming up at Reno Guns and Range. Then I'll be up in Oregon. We don't have any open enrollment classes in Oregon, but I'll hang out with you a little bit. And then we go to Washington. And this year we added a new location. I think it's Reed, Washington, new venue in Washington. That's kind of cool. And then as tradition dictates, we'll do our last class in Maple Falls, Washington, at the headquarters of the CERT pistol with Mike and Britt and their families. And that's always just a good time. So I think it's like the 31st or something, the last class of the year, coming up in 2 weeks. Like this last month of the tour is already like, wow, I can't believe it's only a couple weeks left.
Right. I feel like we just started the tour, but oh wait, that was back in February, March. Yeah. So, all right. We had some questions that we weren't able to get around to. Ask them in the comments of this video, and Rob's usually on for a week after the video is posted, and he'll answer them. And also, we've got the Summer of Self-Defense giveaway. That's the $14,000 prize and 4 winners. And then we have the PDN Train Tour giveaway that ends this month. And it pretty much ends when the tour ends. So hop on that one. And you can catch up with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, internet. If you're here, you found us. Sign up for our newsletter, and we will see you all next month. And Rob, the lights have literally like dimmed down on you. So I think that's a sign that we're done. So have a good night, everybody.